we've seen an incredible rise in economic morality, market-based morality, the idea that two people acting in their own interest will act in the interest of each other and benefit the whole. There's been a lot of talk, as there always is, about harnessing private interests for the social good. This is very important. It can be done. There are opportunities here, but there are a lot of changes that we need to make.
Richard Norgaard. Richard Norgaard.
Yet the market is a very important part of it. The biggest problem is that we're talking about a highly interconnected world that's indivisible, that can't be divided up into property and owned and traded, and we need to address those things. It's also, we've highly developed a system that's very good at providing for individual wants, but not very good at providing for social wants. There's a strategic morality here also. We need to act morally, but we need to act strategically in the sense that we need to start building the trust that we do not have. There's been a considerable discussion of a new science-society relationship, a new partnership. That partnership depends on building trust. That trust depends on breaking down the gaps between the rich and poor in all sorts of ways. And this is especially important in the Anthropocene because we are living in a world in which it's changing extremely rapidly, and the science needs to be moving. The public needs to work with scientists. Scientists need to work with the public. But it's not like we can set up long-term contracts as this is what we know as scientists, and therefore it'll all work out over the next 20, 30 years. We need to be setting up institutions which will be adapted and changed. We need to move into adaptive governance very quickly, and science is going to be moving. To do that, you need a lot more trust than we have today. We don't have enough trust to do what we're trying to do under the old paradigm. So we also are in a world in which different parties will be doing different things, common but differentiated responsibilities, and that also requires trust. So to build this shared vision, even while we're doing different things, we need to act morally, to build the trust, to get a positive feedback process going where we have enough trust to actually work through the problems that we have. I'll be emphasizing economics, but economics is not the only issue, but economics is dominant in so many different ways. So it's important, but in many ways I'm going to be saying we need to get beyond the economics, which is the economy that we need to change. So take-home messages, because I have to be quick here, is that we have been mistakenly applying market partial equilibrium, everything else held equal reasoning to global change problems. Economics is much more interesting and complex than it is usually presented, that basically the economics profession has denied its own theory. I would say it's limited its theory in many ways. You can say economists have castrated themselves so that they're compatible, so that they're safe in the halls of economic power that we have. And I'm not critiquing economics. I will be critiquing how we have misused economics and the inappropriateness of the situation we're in. The other problem we have is that the economics that we are practicing looks to the past in order to say this is the way things are, and to develop parameters about the correct rate of interest, for example. But the past has been an unsustainable economy, and to think about a new economy, you can't really sort of base your judgments on the past. To put this in graphical terms, and this is a little bit difficult to explain in an instantaneous talk, but if you look at the present on the x-axis and the future on the y-axis, and you think about future generations and current generations and ecosystem services, a lot of the problem is that we're at point A, and economics as practice can move us towards point B. That's an improvement in efficiency, and efficiency is extremely important. But we we need to move to point C. And C is actually different. It's not that it's inefficient. Every point on that frontier, that curved boundary out there, is an efficient point. This has been known in economics since the 1880s, that there's equity and efficiency, but they're not juxtaposed. They are interrelated, and we need to bring that interrelation back in. So again and again, you will hear economists say, well, we deal with efficiency. Equity is a political problem. We don't deal with that. That is false or very constrained economics. We need to bring our economics profession back to the knowledge that has always known and actually use it. To get to point C, we need to see that future generations have rights to ecosystem services. All the things we're doing now are very good at getting us from A to B. That can help future generations a little bit. It'll help us more. This is the win-win solution. We are not looking necessarily for a win-win solution. We're looking for sustainability, and that means we need to protect the rights of future generations. But this is also true for poor people today. To actually start building the trust, we need to build their rights to a share of the pie. The situation is actually more complicated than I've described, and basically everything we've learned in the last 3 decades about climate change, biodiversity loss, ecosystem change, the frontier, the possibility frontier, has actually shifted in. We've been operating our economy on what we thought was possible in the 1870s or 1970s, the 1980s. By the 1990s, the third millennium, we're actually seeing that the possibility has shrunk in. And now we're trying not to go to point C, we're trying to go to point D. And that may mean that we actually have to start backing off. The current generation needs to be consuming less. And of the current generation that's consuming less, it obviously needs to be the rich that consume less. And that's not a win-win solution. This is something that takes moral courage. This is not something that you can deduce from your economics and say, aha, we can all come out better. We actually probably, I think for sure myself, need to be making decisions where we sacrifice as rich people so that future generations and current poor people can have more. The second lesson I want to bring is that we're rich, as most of us in this room are rich, even if we're from developing nations, because we got ahead of the game. We started out early. We started burning fossil hydrocarbons before other people started burning fossil hydrocarbons. And that has made us rich, but that also means we are responsible for a lot of ecological debt. Ecological debt is represented in this diagram as footprints, where we've taken the rich nations, the poor nations, and the middle-income nations, looking just from 1960 to 2000, and putting it all in $2005, calculating the ecological debt. It's mostly due to climate change, but we also, in this case, looked at the ozone layer, we looked at deforestation, we looked at pollutants in the environment, and mangrove loss, various other factors. Climate change is the biggest of those, but it turns out that the developing countries are about $4 trillion in debt, but the rich countries, and this is not counting the middle-income countries, but just the rich countries, are also about $7.4 trillion in ecological debt to the rest of the world. That's, in effect, the extent to which we have gained our position by hurting others. We need to acknowledge that, work with that, accept that. Again, pure, simple economics, but if we don't confess this and work with it, then we're not going to get the trust to get the science-society relationship that we need to have to get through this. We have an economy that's been very good at very good at promoting this sort of lifestyle. Work, eat, buy, consume, die. We've got this down pat. We need to rethink what we're doing. And again, this is not complaint about economic theory, but it's the way we have set the economy up. We've set the economy up to work, buy, die, not to actually make for meaningful lives. So we need to work much more seriously about what makes for a good life, because I think the rich can cut back tremendously and live better, but we're not having that discussion, and until we have that discussion, we're not going to have the resources available to help the currently poor. We're not going to be able to see how we can provide for future generations without hurting ourselves. I think the rich can live a better life, but we need to get serious. And then we need to make the economy work for us. The invisible hand needs to be told where to go. Once it's told where to go, the invisible hand will work very well. And so this is not a critique of markets, it's a critique of how we have let markets tell us how to live, rather than setting markets up to help us live the way we want to live. So, end with this diagram, a little cartoon. Yes, even if it's a hoax, it's going to be better. And but it's not a hoax. This is all really serious. Thank you.
Let's hope it's not a hoax, and congratulations on managing to boil down your huge body of work to a few slides like that. Thank you, Dave.
Yes.
I wanted to have time to discuss because
Excellent.
this is where the action is.
Exactly. So let me put some questions that have come through. Nathan Pelletier sent us a question from the webcast. He's saying, in light of your argument and general recognition here that the current economic paradigm can't deliver on sustainability objectives, then how do we bring heterodox, multiple economic perspectives and principles, ecological, behavioral, to the center of the discourse?
So it's up to us, and the problem is that we keep sort of talking about reality. The reality is we live in an economy that's not sustainable, and we need to get serious about our conversations about how we can restructure the economy. We can. The economy has changed tremendously in our own lifetimes. We've gone from an economy that was a Cold War economy to an economy that was very concerned with bringing women into the economy and being more culturally equitable. And then we went to an economy that's been globalized, and that's a very different economy that's had all kinds of new ramifications, and we need to take another step. So the economy is not a static thing that's just there. In 4 decades, it's changed at least 3 times in very significant ways.
So can I just ask you this before letting you go, Dick? Where does pricing come into all this, and incentives? There's a question from Herman Lotze-Kampen from PIC, which I think is in Potsdam, saying he thinks you need clear incentives, carbon trading schemes, water pricing, nitrogen taxation. But do you?
Yes, incentives help. There's no question but we can't look to the economy to design the incentives. We need to look to what kind of economy we want to have. So you can't sort of go back and say, gee, this is what we know from the economy we've had, and then design the incentives. So the $10 per ton carbon prices that we generate by looking at the economy we have are absurdly low prices. We need to say, look, we want to have an economy in 2025 that looks very different. Let's model that, and then say what kind of incentives will get us there, rather than base it on where we're at.
Vision and work backwards.
Right. We're looking from the past, trying to go forward, and you have to set your goals and then use economics for that, and prices will be very important.
Yeah. You use economics as your tool to get there.
Right.
Thank
And
you.
but I want to make one more point. It's extremely important that prices are understood as just equilibrating mechanisms. They just reflect the economy we have, not the economy we want to have. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard. Bye-bye. So part of that vision is more sustainable cities, and we've had touched on that theme quite a bit over the last few days. Let's explore it further. I'd like to introduce you to Shubhakar Dhakal, who is the Executive Director of the Japan office of the Global Carbon Project. He has years of research and experience dealing with energy and environmental issues in cities. Shubhakar.
Thank you, Nisha. Friends and colleagues, this morning I'm going to talk to you about developing environmentally sustainable cities. Basically, I have three messages to deliver you. The first message is to give you a sense of the speed, scale, and the complexity of urbanization, which is very, very unprecedented. And the second key message I want to leave you with is that the sustainability challenges in relation to cities are yet enormous and multifaceted, and I'm arguing for the need for new metrics to comprehend and act. And the third message I want to deliver you is that there are opportunities for the transformative change, but we need collective push. Just to give you a sense of rapidly urbanizing world, in a sense of speed, it took us 10,000 years to have 1 billion urban population in the world. It took us only 25 years to add 2nd billion. It took us much less time to add the 3rd billion, and it will most likely take us only less than 15 years to add the 4th billion of the population. We are at the level of 3.5 billion urban population, roughly 50% of the global population, and also this
Not
means
with the
that
vaccines
urban
and the
area at the
chemtrails, it
moment,
won't, and the GMO food.
From the land use perspective, somewhere between 0.2 to 2.4% of the global terrestrial land is urban, and also the now rural population, which is very crucial, is most likely to decline from 2020 onwards. So what we'll see, the trend here is very, very rapidly urbanizing world, and in next 40 years, by 2050, we are going to add 2.8 billion people in our cities, which we did in last 60 years. We are going to add that much in next 40 years by 2050.
They're
so
going to shove people into cities from Agenda 21.
And that means we are going to make our land use also moving towards that direction. Urban expansion is likely to be at the range of 1.5 million square kilometer in next 20
Not if Agenda
years.
21 kicks everybody out of the countryside and shoves them into cities, United Nations. Agenda 21.
We also know that most of this urbanization and population growth will take place in the medium and small scale cities. Of course, we are very much transfixed on the problems of the megacities or big cities, but small scale and the medium sized cities are the ones where all this growth is going to happen. There are enough sustainability challenges for us to deal with. We are already struggling, our cities are already struggling with a number of sustainability challenges arising from different components in the urban system. Just to give you a sense of different couple of indicators, urban contribution to the global primary energy demand is roughly about 2/3 of the global primary energy use, which is likely to be increased significantly in next couple of decades. To give you a sense of CO2 emissions coming out from urban area, roughly 70% of the global CO2 emissions from energy use is attributed to city, which is likely to go up to 76% in next 20 years or so. And also the share of urban CO2 emissions in different parts of the world, different countries are enormous. Look the case of China. Almost 85% of the China's energy related CO2 emissions can be attributed to the urban areas. So we are talking about a big numbers here. Similarly, if you look at the per capita CO2 emission, we see that the per capita CO2 emission in cities are perhaps lesser than the national average in the developed part of the world. But in the developing country, this per capita CO2 emission in cities are way higher than the national average. And we are talking about all the urban growth happening in all this developing part of the world, and that puts us into pretty big challenge. Our sustainability challenge is not only CO2 emission and energy, air pollution. Some of the study done based on the World Bank data on 3,200 cities shows that still we have a big fraction of the urban population living under the not very healthy air pollution. Almost 740 million people are above the minimum WHO air quality standards. There are enormous challenge. Look at the people in the slum. The number of people living in a slum in terms of proportion has declined, but if you look at the sheer number, almost 827 million people still live in the slum. We feel perhaps that urban area has better energy access, which is true compared to the rural area and other things. But still, there's a big chunk of the urban population without even access to electricity. Up to 275 million people living in cities are without access to electricity, mostly in the sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. The amount of the investment that has to go there in order to have this minimum access of electricity would run into the $1 trillion. Now, we have been talking a lot about sustainable city, and what is environmentally sustainable city can be contested. There are many approaches to looking into the environmental sustainability. I do not want to go too much into that debate, but many of these frameworks and many of these approaches what we have at the moment basically have some kind of disconnect. And two key aspects of this global sustainability has not been realized in those urban environmental sustainability debate. For example, the connectivity between cities, the connectivity between cities and hinterlands, the dimension of consumption in cities, and what are the environmental burden imposed by city to the outside its boundaries. All these different new set of indicators need to go into the environmentally sustainable matrix that we are interested in order to excel global environmental sustainability. Just to